Hi, everyone. It's Kitty Crysdale here from Lakeview Aquatic Consultants. Welcome back, or welcome if you are new here. So we've started a new series where I'm talking about our weekly newsletter, providing an audio recap for those of you who don't have the time to read yet another newsletter in your inbox. So today I'm going to be talking about our newsletter that just went out yesterday. It was the September 18th, 2025 newsletter, and it's entitled Women in the Surf Park Industry. So in case you missed it, every week I do send out a newsletter because here in Canada, we're not able to share a lot of interesting news directly on any Meta products. So Bill C-18 here in Canada prohibits us or anybody from resharing news articles on Facebook, Instagram, different Meta products. And that's how we started this newsletter about a year and a half ago. And in this week's newsletter, I actually switched up the orientation a little bit. Typically, it starts off with an op-ed from me. In this particular newsletter, I'm going to take you through the news articles at the top of the newsletter and then the op-ed at the bottom of the newsletter. As always, with this recap video, I am giving you the Coles notes. I guess that's dating myself, the wiki, the short version of the article, why I included it, why I think it's important, the salient points. If you want to learn more about a particular article, I would strongly encourage you to actually read it. It is linked in the newsletter, which is also linked directly in the YouTube description box below. So let's get into it with this newsletter. So summer is over and we're already starting to see a mix of different things happening in the industry in North America. So the first article I led with this week was an update on the deadly Surfside Condo collapse in Florida. And there is now conclusive evidence that it started in the pool. So for those of you who have been following this story as I have, a number of years ago, this condo building on the coast of Florida tragically collapsed in the middle of the night. The security footage is absolutely catastrophic and devastating. Over 100 people died. There had long been rumors that penetration from the basin, so water leaving the basin, had penetrated into the parkade, the underground parking garage, and that may have contributed to structural collapse of the core of the building. And it seems as though now that there is more conclusive evidence that is the case, which is going to have wide-ranging consequences for our industry. So this is not a very detailed article. It's just giving you an update on the status of the investigation. This is something I'm going to continue to cover, and I'm also going to see if I can dig out some notes I have from a presentation I intended from a technical investigator, but really substantial news for our industry to show that corrosion associated with a swimming pool in an apartment building did lead to the structural collapse of a multi-story building, which then resulted in over 100 people terribly losing their lives. So a really important story for us to be aware of. The next article I shared was regarding the Barhead Swim Club asking for exclusive pool space as membership surges. I have long been on the receiving end in my municipal aquatic career of competitive swim clubs who feel that they are entitled to primetime pool space to practice at not necessarily the best financial rates to the organization. So I'm a little bit biased coming into this article, but I think it's a great opportunity for any organization to revisit. Do you have space allocation policies written and approved by either your council, your senior leadership, well in advance of requests like this? Because as a management consultant, I continue to see organizations, not just community pools, but other organizations as well, struggle with requests for pool space, and they can't objectively adjudicate how to split that pool space up into for-profit, not-for-profit, youth, adult, internal programming, etc. So if you do not have a space allocation procedure, this is now the time to really think about doing one. This leads us into the next article I shared in this week's newsletter. It sounds kind of like a joke, but it was a real thing. Emotional support alligator is no longer welcome in Pennsylvania Walmart. So this was a man who has what he claims is an emotional support alligator. That's definitely the first time I've heard of such an emotional support creature. In my own life here in Alberta, I have encountered emotional support dogs for sure, as well as cats, and even my local community pool struggled with an emotional support pig. Depending on where you live and work, the definition of emotional support animal or aid, it may be very vague. And so you as an organization may need to create legally compliant policies that don't exclude people like the blind with guide dogs, but having clear policies as to the behaviors and admission of those animals. Speaking to Kathleen Forrestel, who was the blind swimmer who presented for the 2021 Pool A webinar, which is also linked in this newsletter. She spoke about how her guide dog never swims with her when she goes to the pool, and she would not expect a guide dog to go swimming. Their job is to sit on the side of the pool and to be the guide dog for the blind person. And so it may be something similar, creating a policy for your organization, for your aquatic facility. What is the role and the care, and where does that animal or person wait if they are accompanying someone to your facility? The next article I shared was about the rollout of digital check-in kiosks at Great Wolf Lodge. If you're not familiar with Great Wolf Lodge, they are destination hotel resorts for families with large family amenities like indoor water parks, mini putt, crafts, play structures, ropes courses, that sort of thing. And so they were discussing the availability of these kiosks for individuals to check into the water park and receive a wristband directly from the kiosk without dealing with a person. I think this is actually a huge movement in the right direction for the aquatic and recreation industry. This is not about cutting jobs or personnel. This is about providing opportunities for customers who are more comfortable using technology to alleviate some of the pressure points, some of the lines that the human customer service agents, they're working with families or they're working with individuals who are not as comfortable with technology. There's always going to be a mixture of people, the same way older generations may still be more comfortable going into the bank and talking to a human teller, whereas younger generations are pretty comfortable using their phone app, using an ATM machine, doing electronic payments. And so it's about providing different levels of service and different types of service that people and clients can access based on their own preferences. No different from a client who prefers to email me a request versus phoning. I also shared an article about pickleball. If you've been living under a rock, then you know that pickleball is not, you don't know that pickleball is one of the fastest growing recreation and competitive sports in North America. I am always watching what's happening with pickleball because it is so interesting to see the evolution and growth of this sport for all ages. Yes, we don't have pickleball in pools, but it's like every generation, every time period or era, there is fitness trends that are popular. So let's say in the 1980s and 90s, it was jazzercise, it was Jane Fonda, it was fitness at home of a certain type with leggings and bodysuits. Fast forward to 2025, it's pickleball. Maybe in 2020, we could think back and say it was Peloton, it was cycle, spinning. And so I think it's very important, even though we may work primarily in aquatics, to be aware of what is happening outside of our direct sphere in terms of also the types of services like a check-in kiosk, like other things like an automated locker or payment systems. Those will eventually percolate down to aquatic facilities, and those aquatic facilities that are proactive in researching new options and technologies that can help them will really help you solve some of the pain points that we all deal with every day. Some other articles that I mentioned in the September 18th newsletter, I had a feature on a Canadian company that is part of the global surf park boom. I have an article alleging a entrapment of a 7-year-old boy in a condo. Uh, Entrapment, if you've been here for a while, you know it is a professional interest for me. I strongly feel that we need greater education about ongoing entrapments. The Virginia Graham Baker Pool and Spa Safety Act is a wonderful piece of legislation. It has done wonders in reducing entrapments. However, entrapments continue to occur. Some of you might recall the videos I've done regarding the Houston entrapment of Elia Lynette Jaco in 2024. Those are available on the YouTube channel, as well as other non-fatal and very, very sad with morbidity entrapments that continue to occur around the world. So I think it's really important that we showcase these stories, even if they're really awful for the families and for the victims, because we as an industry, we can't pretend that this doesn't still happen. Another passion that I have, some of you might be aware of, is regarding lifeguard injuries and fatalities on the job. Back in spring of 2024, I did a presentation regarding lifeguard injuries and fatalities. You can catch that on the YouTube channel under the presentation playlist. And so I continue to track any cases that I hear in the media regarding serious lifeguard injury and fatality. And so recently there was a case of a lifeguard drowning. We don't have a lot of details, but the state is opening up an investigation regarding this incident as a workplace fatality. So hopefully we can learn more details of what specifically happened, and that can inform how we as aquatic professionals, pool managers, we think about our staffing models to make sure that people are not working alone, because consistently in my research for that presentation, we did see scenarios where there were medical incidents or injuries that occurred where the lifeguard could have been saved or could have been taken to hospital at a much earlier point than they were. Further down, I have an article that states Uber sued by the Department of Justice for alleged discrimination against disabled riders. I am not a disabled person, but I do feel that this is likely just the tip of the iceberg based on my conversation with Kathleen Forrestel, who had shared in our conversations that as a blind individual here in Canada, that she has had repeated instances of rideshare drivers such as Uber and Lyft either decline her ride or drive off without taking her because her dog they deem to be a pet, even though it is a licensed Canadian guide dog and she is entitled to take that guide dog anywhere with her in public. So I don't doubt that this is an ongoing, if not chronic, issue across the organization, and that there is need to improve equity and access for disabled riders. There was a report this week that the family of two teen boys who drowned in New Jersey as part of a school pool trip, they are rejecting a $14 million settlement. This is a case I've touched on a little bit, but I haven't reshared the footage. This is the one where there is a male lifeguard who's walking out into the hallway away from the pool deck, allegedly while the pool is in use by a school group. And it was only much later that the children or the boys were recovered from the pool, and they did die from their injuries, their submersion in the pool. I really try and avoid sharing too much lifeguard litigation. I understand a family has pain and they are entitled to sue the organization, the lifeguard who they feel is responsible, but I don't necessarily want to participate in that before the judicial process has reached its natural conclusion. I understand when there's a final judgment or a final court decision, but because we don't have all the details, we don't have all the footage before and after the clips that were shown in the public, because we don't have the disclosure, we don't have the legal proceedings, I generally tend to stay away from too much hearsay or speculation. It doesn't make me happy. I shared an article regarding Gen Z and their interest in luxury gyms. This is a conversation I've been having in parallel with a few people recently. I would say for the last 10 years, I have been a quote luxury gym user. I pay a premium up to $30 for a drop-in yoga class or up to $200 a month for a boutique fitness experience. I understand that is not affordable or accessible to everyone, but it does inform a lot of what I see happening in the industry. And we are certainly seeing, at least in my gym that I go to in Calgary, a huge uptick in Gen Z attendance. And not just because they want to be fit and look a certain way, but it certainly is reflected in the experience that I have had. And it's interesting to see it discussed in this article. There is a plan in Gothenburg, Sweden, maybe a couple of months. Family of teens shot at Douglas Park pool sue former lifeguard and Chicago Park District. So this was such a strange story when it happened. I initially ignored it because it appeared as though somebody who is a lifeguard happened to shoot someone and they died near their place of work, which was a pool. And I don't mean to undermine the significance, but that did not fit the profile of what I like to talk about in the weekly newsletter. The crime was not associated, in my opinion, with water safety or drowning prevention. And certainly there are bad lifeguards out there. That didn't surprise me. But now there appears to be claims that this individual may have been having changing behaviors at work. This may have been associated with the pool. And so it'll be interesting to see exactly how this is categorized in terms of, is it becoming a workplace violence story, but employee violence or aggression against a customer? We don't have all the details yet, but I did feel it was important to provide this context as the story is developing. I shared a really cool company I came across that offers a backyard dive-in movie package as well as a pool rental company. So a really interesting concept where you pay a fee and they come and set up a above ground pool in your backyard for a certain period of time, which I think is a really interesting model for people who are interested in having an above ground pool. The next article was theme park spending down 5% during lackluster summer. And this actually is in line with a conversation I had today with a supplier who was saying something similar in regards to large amusement parks where people just don't have the money in this economy with tariffs with different political unrest. And so people who might have previously gone to an amusement park for a week, they're now going as a family maybe for 1 or 2 days, just for the weekend. And that was reflected in the conversation I had with the supplier today, as well as also what I've been hearing just informally from different pool operators in terms of attendance this summer and spending. Galveston EMS faces scrutiny over a 20-minute delay after 2 officers nearly drowned in training at Schlitterbahn. I mentioned this article a few weeks ago, but we didn't have the note yet about the delay. It did state that there was emergency services training taking place at Schlitterbahn Water Park, that was a part of their annual training regimen, and that there was a submersion and that the employees were taken to the hospital. But now details are coming out alleging that there was a significant delay in attending the incident and the transport. And I will be very curious to see how this ends up working out. Having been to Galveston, Texas, it is a strip of land that once you get across the causeway and onto the strip of Galveston, it is a pretty small area. And so I could understand if EMS was on land and had to cross the causeway and there was some sort of construction or some sort of road closure, but it's going to be difficult to justify that kind of delay in town if they were on the barrier island, so to speak. The next article that I shared was about a child critically injured after a near drowning at Westside Airbnb in San Antonio. If you've been here for a while, you know how much I dislike the terminology near drowning. There was no near drowning. There was a submersion. The child went underwater. In fact, the fact that they were critically injured indicates that it was not a near drowning. It was actually pretty significant if there are morbidities associated with that. And the main reason I shared this story is it lines up pretty close to Airbnb's release of a new feature a few weeks ago pertaining to water safety education for properties and rentals adjacent to water, not only pools, but it's also my understanding like lakes and rivers. And so I am a little bit cynical insofar as I don't think Airbnb introduced this measure just for public drowning prevention. I think they are fully aware of these types of incidents and they had to cover their butts, so to speak, by adding this feature. I've shared this story a few times, but there is an influencer I follow who a number of years ago, after her first child had grown to be a toddler, kudos to her for admitting on Instagram stories, but she had rented a villa in Mexico, somewhere like Cabo, and she arrived and realized to her horror that she hadn't considered that her daughter is now mobile as a toddler, and she had rented a cliffside villa with an infinity pool with no fence, obviously, because it was intended for adults, and she had to spend the whole weekend watching her kids and watching her daughter and keeping the door locked, which I saw her pilloried in the comments for doing that. So maybe it wasn't a story. I don't recall where I saw the comments, but credit to her that this would have benefited a new mom who wasn't accustomed to having a mobile child and thinking about water safety and drowning prevention. Because if you don't come from a water safety background, you don't have a pool in your backyard, you might not have thought about these types of things. I shared a story out of Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, about a Snapchat influencer whose toddler recently drowned while visiting a family home with a swimming pool. Unfortunately, this has shades of Emily Kieser out of Arizona, who we talked about last week. I'm not suggesting that influencers deserve any different type of treatment from any normal family who is undergoing a tragedy, but I do think it's important to know that when these instances, when these cases happen, it is a piece of education, if we can, respectfully, that drowning can happen to anyone, anytime, anywhere. It has nothing to do with financial, family demographics, location. It has nothing to do with who you are as a person. It is very important that we continue to highlight these cases because people think that drowning cannot happen to them. One of the last few articles I shared was out of the UK, and it was a discussion of two leisure centers, one which was going to have a reduction in hours of the pool, potentially a closure of the pool, and the other one that wasn't. And the article did a really good job highlighting how the funding sources in adjacent communities, even in the same region, may pull from different pots of money. And so you can't necessarily compare one facility to another. It's not straight apples to apples. It's often apples to oranges, even though the community may not understand why one pool is open and another pool is closed. The next article was regarding toe touching. So if you don't have a competitive swim background, you may not be familiar with the terminology or the purpose of toe touching when you're lane swimming in regards to the etiquette to pass a slower swimmer. So this was an interesting conversation for those people who are not interested in competitive swimming or don't have that background, whether or not that behavior is acceptable. And I think it speaks to the larger conversation regarding lane etiquette in general. The average leisure swimmer, in my experience, does not understand the purpose of the slow, medium, and fast signs during lap swim. They may not even understand how to circle swim. And that's be rude, but it's that a lot of pools and lifeguards make assumptions and they get frustrated. Well, why don't they follow the pattern? They don't know the pattern. There's very little education done in terms of pool etiquette. And so in the newsletter, I did highlight the city of Coquitlam, British Columbia, which had an excellent PSA a couple of years ago. I will also reshare it on our Facebook page again. This is a great one to show at your next staff in service, to have a 5 or 10 minute toolbox discussion of really taking the time to educate people who come to our facilities if they are asking questions that lead us to think they may not know the etiquette of our pools in North America. I had a brief article about a hotel that's under construction in the Middle East, which is going to be one of the tallest buildings in the world, the tallest hotel in the world, and apparently the highest rooftop swimming pool in the world. I shared an article about a pool that is shaped like the state of Texas, and it's on the National Register of Historic Places in Plano, Texas, just a human interest story. And then I ended off the article mentioning, if you're not aware of the BC Parks and Recreation Association, they have a biennial aquatic conference that's coming up here in Vancouver in November. And one of the great things about that is they are still offering a hybrid attendance. So if you don't have the time or the budget to fly to Vancouver and go to the 2-day event, there is a very affordable hybrid option. And I'm very happy to see that some event planners are realizing that virtual is the way of the future for some people and some budgets. It certainly does not replace those human interactions. It's great to have a cup of coffee in the morning and talk to your industry colleagues and be rejuvenated. But the reality in 2025, 2026 budgets in terms of flights and hotels and attendance, especially in Vancouver, the hotels are outrageous. I was just there in July. The hybrid is a great option for any aquatic professional who's interested in getting some professional development in, but without the ability to travel. And then the very last part of our September 18th newsletter was my op-ed, which I moved to the bottom this week. Normally it is the lead of the newsletter. And I shared my thoughts on a recent event schedule I saw. This is from the surf park industry, which is a massive growing part of aquatics in general. I don't have the statistics offhand, but the number of projects under construction and the number of projects in development is outrageous in terms of we're going from zero surf parks 15, 20 years ago to hundreds in the next 15 years. But I was still really disappointed to see that their upcoming annual event in Virginia, there is not a single female speaker on the agenda. And as best as I can tell, there's only one person of color. And so I don't understand how, with all due respect to not having women or people of color speakers, quote, because we should, maybe they genuinely can't find people, but I'm still disappointed to see that there is not that critical reflection that women like to surf too. And also, we want to incorporate people of color in our positions of leadership, in our decision making roles, in our consultation about how to operate our facility and make it welcoming to all people. No different from people with different needs, accessibility, disability, I think a variety of ages. I just was really discouraged because this was an event I had previously considered attending. And now I'm thinking, okay, well, how critical is this type of event? How well-rounded is this type of event if there is not a variety of speakers? Now, it was pointed out to me that there is a wide variety of geographic regions reflected in the speakers who are attending, and that is reflective of surfing in general culturally. But I still have my doubts at this stage. I have seen female presenters, people of color presenting on surf parks at places like World Water Park Association's conference. And so to not have any women or people of color substantially represented, even 20 or 30% would have been great. A handful is a bit discouraging to me. And so I will not be spending my professional development dollars to go to this event. Maybe that's just me. Maybe this is not something that is concerned other aquatic professionals. Maybe I'm out to lunch on this. You guys can let me know in the comments below. This has been a recap of our September 18th, 2025 newsletter. You can read all of the articles that I've mentioned in this chat down below. You can read the full article. You can read the full newsletter down below or subscribe to get it in your inbox every Wednesday. Thank you so much for being here, and I will catch you in the next video.